Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for the historic best of one format. If you're looking for best of three or other formats, Explorer, Standard, whatever you may, check out the playlist, meta breakdown, and we usually get a video out for each of the formats each week, provided there is data each week. As always, we get the data from Untapped.gg, which is what you see on screen. Companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client, tracks your win rates, loss rates, deck collections, whole bunch of in-game overlays, whole bunch of functionality, free to use. Link is in the video description. I will paste, previously I was just doing deck list dumps in the video description. I will do full deck list links so you can easily import it from mobile to your Arena client based on past feedback. So that'll be all provided in the video description so you can copy these and get going. So for this particular week, we are looking September 18th through the 25th, Platinum to Mythic rank. 42,000 games of Historic Best of One were played. And jumping into it, top deck again this week is the Izzet's Wizards deck. So with this here, you have a 67% win rate. And what you're trying to do is basically play a Wizards Spellslinger deck. And the most recent card added to this deck was Balmor Battle Mage Captain. So whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get all your creatures get +1/0 and gain trample till end of turn. You pair that with like Symmetry Sage, which increases the base power of your creatures to 3. So you have a lot of these weenie creatures with like prowess, so you up their base power, and then you get all this added stack on top. So a lot of blitz damage with this deck. You can deal like huge chunks of damage in one shot. Similarly, you have Soulscar Mage, which gets bigger, but also makes your burn spells redistribute the damage as -1/1 counters to deal with bigger creatures, so you can kind of stack damage on top. Then you have Dreadhorde Arcanist, which has a number of ways to give its power greater than 1, so it'll allow you to flash back 2 or 3 mana spells. It's particularly useful when you can flash back stuff like Expressive Iteration or Mentor's Guidance to get a whole bunch of extra card draw in place. You have Consider as a cheap cantrip, Play with Fire, Static Discharge, Wizard Lightning, and a Spike Field Hazard as some burn. And then Reckless Charge is really kind of the engine card in a way, because it just turns like your 1-drop into a hasty creature, smash through a lot of damage. Like you can, Dreadhorde, give it haste, either cast it again to give it another boost. That's 7 power with trample for 4 mana. So it kind of comes out of nowhere, so you can kind of do stuff like that. A lot of kind of interesting ways to play that. One thing we have seen some of these decks do is play, instead of the Storm Carved Cave, they've gone with the new Pain Land. I forgot the name of it, but the blue-red land from the most recent set is seeing some play in it. So next deck up, we have Azorias Affinity. This was a deck that last week was towards the top of the meta as well. And this deck is an artifact synergy deck. And your kind of 2 main artifact payoffs are Nettlecyst, where it's Living Weapon. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Living Weapon means it's an equipment that comes with a 0/0 germ that comes automatically attached to the weapon. So you don't have to worry about the first time about equipping it. Its power and toughness gets a boost based on the number of artifacts and enchantments you control. So all your artifacts boosted up. You can get really big creatures. Thought Monitor costs 1 less for each artifact you have in play. That's what Affinity for Artifacts means. So it could be a 1 mana 2/2 flyer that draws 2 cards, helps refill your hand that way there. Karn's -2 makes big Karnstructs that basically power and toughness, the same text as Nettlecyst. Metallic Rebuke gets a cost reduction with Improvise, where you can tap untapped artifacts to pay for part of its casting cost. So this could be a 1 mana spell. And then this deck here is playing the Retrofitter Foundry, which was a newer card from the recent anthology. And while you can make little dorks, the kind of combo with this deck is turn 1 Ornithopter. It's a Thopter, so it already meets the condition of its last ability. So you can have a turn 1 4/4, which is pretty sweet. Other than that, you got like Esper Sentinel to kind of tax your opponent, Prototype to ramp and channel, Lifelink Trample, some removal, and Smith helps you dig. This deck's also playing some of the artifact lands in Razortide Bridge, as well as Darkseal Citadel. Moving next, we have Mono Green Elves, and interestingly, this version seems to be a little bit dated. Folks just haven't added in the new Lord. There's the 2 mana 1/1 that makes your elves 1 bigger, and whenever you cast an elf, you can pay a green to draw a card. Notable omission from this deck, but this deck's really just about trying to ramp as much as possible, and then collect a company and get more elves. You have a few lords like Impervious Perfect. You have the Elvish Archdruid, Circle of Dream Druid that generates a bunch of mana. Elvish Clan Caller buffs your squad. And then with all that mana, same with like Groin Rites of Illamog, you get basically Gaia's Cradle at home. You pump it into either Allosaurus Shepherd, that makes all your elves into 5/5s, or you do Elvish War Master that gives them all +2/2 and trample, or you cast Crater Hoof Behemoth and smash your opponent in the face. The next deck up, we have Azorious Control. So we've seen a lot of kind of creature decks, and this Azorious deck, there's basically 2 kind of shells with Azorious. There's the Lotus Field and the non-Lotus Field version. This one is the Lotus Field version with a 61% win rate. So Lotus Field is basically a land that adds 3 mana of any color. That seems busted. It has the condition though, when it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice 2 lands. So that's usually a downside because it kind of sets you back tempo-wise. But with this deck, what you're trying to do is get around that sacrifice condition. So if you play Strict Proctor, the trigger goes on the stack, you don't pay the ability, so you don't have to sacrifice Lotus Field. So on turn 3, you can basically have 5 mana producing of land that you then tap your next turn with. You can also, on turn 2, with a blue mana up, stifle the trigger. That way your opponent can't cast it like that. And you can also discontinuity for 2 mana on your turn to do the same effect. Outside of that, it's basically a blue-white control deck. Lots of removal, counter spells, draw spells, notably Divine Purge, very good against the artifact deck because it hits artifacts and enchantments. And your win conditions are Teferi, Wandering Emperor, Shark Typhoon, or some Hall of the Storm Giants or Castle Ardenvale. But really, it's your opponent losing all hope, desire to play, and just frustratingly hitting Alt F4 concede. Mono Red, a deck I very much enjoy. However, this is not my preferred configuration of the Mono Red deck. I can show you mine after too. I got Mythic with Mono Red this month, but this deck's looking to go aggro as fast as possible. Kind of the standout card, Reckless Ringleader here, lets you give a card in your hand perpetually haste, meaning it can come down with haste. Very good with stuff like Annex, Chain Whirler, Torbrand, kind of all mixed into here. This is a Torbrand Cleave deck to try to go over the top. Notably, this version is playing Shock. You should just be playing Play with Fire. It's strictly better. It goes face, and you get to scry. This particular configuration, 21 lands is too few. You should be playing 23 to 24 lands if you're on this top end of 4 mana. 21, you'll be mana screwed. You also only want to play 1 castle. You're going to more often than not have this come into play untapped. But I do like this. You should also be playing 1 channel land in place, the Sokuzen. So this is this version of the deck. Now, the notable things with this version, you're going to be fairly weak to Elves. You do have some burn. Chain Whirler could sometimes help, but Ferocodon's really good. This version is going to have a hard time beating life gain of any variety. It also can't beat any of like the Reanimator, Serap, Emissary, Lock decks, 9 Lives decks, because you're not playing Stomp, which is a very good card in Bone Crusher Giant. I can show you my version. Mono Red aggro. I've played a lot of Mono Red this season. I haven't been playing too much, but like as an example, if we go current and previous set, I've played almost 200 games with this deck with varied configurations, have almost a 70% win rate. So the current configuration I'm on is to deal with the uptick in Elves decks. The hardest matchup is the Wizards deck, which just depends on the hand. The version I've been playing has Radha's Firebrand as a 2-of in place of Kari Zev. This allows you to kind of push through extra points of damage thanks to the unblockable. But for 1-drops, it's Kumano, Play with Fire, Reckless Ringleader. 2-drops is Radha, Robber of Rich, Burning Tree. You also have the Stomp, which kind of acts as a 2-drop. The card that's notably really good in this deck is Lelia, Blade Reforge. You're often going to run out of cards, so refilling your hand has a lot of utility. This also just gets really big, and it's a haste threat on its own. Ferocodon's really good. Chain Whirler. You think Chain Whirler would be good against Elves, but they have so many Lords that it's also hard to kind of get over the top. If you're running into a lot of Elves, going to 3 Ember Cleaves might be reasonable to kind of go over the top, but it makes you worse against like drawing multiples against something like Wizards or blue-white control or stuff like that. When you want it, but you're not all in. You can usually just go wide and push damage and stuff like that. And you'll see with this version I have 24 lands. I've tried 23. 24 is kind of that spot, but you're playing a lot of utility lands. 1 castle, 3 den, 4 Ramanap, Sokazan. So you always have something to do with your mana. And you can see like my win rate's pretty high against a whole variety of decks. And then Wizards, I'm like sub 50%, I think. Oh, that was with Luris Cat Oven. This deck couldn't beat Luris Cat Oven. It was like impossible to beat that deck. But thankfully everything got nerfed out of that deck. And lastly, okay, so I'm going to warn you. Every so often there comes a deck that you question how, why, who. 5-color Reanimator Planeswalker deck Planeswalker combo. 57% win rate, 130 games. So it's not like the streamer came out and was like, ultimate broken busted deck, plays 2 games, 100% win rate. This deck has won games. And you ask yourself, how does it win games? All right, so I have to look this one up a bit. So you go self-mill. All these decks are usually a Mizzix Mastery kind of shell. So Faithless Looting, throw stuff in your graveyard. Thrill of Discovery, throw stuff in your graveyard. Cathartic Reunion, throw stuff in your graveyard. You have Mizzix Mastery. Mizzix Mastery will likely target Eerie Ultimatum, which lets you cast a bunch of spells. You can go Eerie Ultimatum, Alrund's Epiphany, Vorinclex, any of these Planeswalkers with an ultimate that pretty much makes you win the game or puts you well ahead. Liliana makes your opponent sack everything. Professor Onyx deals a whole bunch of damage. Chandra Boiled Pyromancer, staple in everyone's Chandra Tribal EDH deck. Ultimate lets you deal 10 damage to target player and each creature and Planeswalker they control. We got Rowan Fearless Spark Mage. Gain control of all creatures until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste. Jace basically means they get an emblem, not an album. So there's a whole bunch of things. You can go Omniscience. With all the stuff in your graveyard, you can cast Triumphant Reckoning, which returns all artifacts, enchantments, and Planeswalkers from your graveyard to the battlefield. With that, you can get like... There's just so many lines with this deck. Eerie Ultimatum, return it all to your grave from your one of each permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield. Onto a version as a sweeper. Scholar of the Lost Troves can be reanimated and then cast another thing from your graveyard. It's just like so many layers. So like this is just impressive. I want to preface, I do not endorse nor condone spending wildcards to cast Chandra Boiled Pyromancer or Fearless Spark Mage. But yeah, you know, all the power to you. I'm actually curious. Are they playing this like in higher ranks? Okay. So it's being played in Platinum to some amount. Again, your mileage may vary, but this one is a collection of Magic the Gathering cards. This portion here is like the Dragonstorm combo, so I can see that being reasonable. The other cards, yeah, I never want to see any sort of Unlicensed Hearse or anything, but a cool deck nonetheless. If anyone's tried it out, let me know. But I am going to wrap this week's up. As always, if you do enjoy the content, I would greatly appreciate if you haven't done so already, subscribing to the channel. I'm about 40 subs short of 6,000, and I'm trying to hit it before the end of the month. It's free. Just kind of lets you know when we go live with any of these new videos. And if you already are subbed to the channel, it's always super helpful if you drop a comment or like the video. It helps the Google Overlords algorithm suggest me to other folks and helps me continue with the channel. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.